today. So first of all, you can see that Jayne has a very different screen up for you today, and she's asking, do you want to play a game? So in 2013, we're rolling out a new initiative here of games as a learning tool in the classroom. So in addition to Jayne's presentation today on problem management, you're going to be able to participate and play the game with us today. So if you have a smartphone, we'd like you to download the mobile app. If you're going to use your PC, you can open up a second window and use the link for that. And the ping ID number that we're going to be using for our game this afternoon, after the webinar today, is going to be 5381. And that information is also on the right-hand side in your chat window. So as we go forward, you can be logging in and get your phone ready or get your laptop ready. And if you have any questions on it, if you're having any difficulties, it's pretty easy to do, but if you do have any issues, just chat into us, and we'll be happy to help you with that. And you can also see you can download today's slides for the presentation by clicking on the link in the chat window. And some of you may have firewalls to access it, so you can download the slides right from our website. And that link is also in your chat window on the side of your screen today.
And Karen, we've had our first ping question. So the question was, I can't find it in the iTunes store, which is a great question. Thank you, Bill. It's actually not in the App Store. You're just going to go to, on your phone in your browser, www.c3ping.com/mobile. And again, that's www.c3ping.com/mobile.
Lisa, it's actually a /mobile.
Oh,
on that one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I never could tell my forward and my backs. And there's also a question from a Mr., I'm guessing Goodwin, about where to download the slide deck from, and it is in the chat window. But let me go ahead and resend that out to the entire audience. There you go.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. Let's get going, Karen.
Yes, and we have any more questions on ping, or are we good?
That's it so far.
Okay. So today we're pleased to have our own Jayne Groll with us. Jayne's presentation is titled, If I Knew Then What I Know Now, Problem Management. During the presentation, the information that Jayne presents may raise some questions, or you might be looking for additional clarification or information. So we've scheduled time at the end of today's session to answer your questions. So as I mentioned, Jayne's going to go through her presentation, then we're going to do a game to see how much you've learned in the presentation, and then we're going to go on to our Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation at all, just open your chat window by clicking on the plus sign at the end of the word chat, and type your question into the chat log section and click send. In the background, we'll be reviewing those and getting those ready for the end of class. So we've got a large number of attendees, so let's get started. For those of you new to ITSM Academy, here's a quick overview. ITSM Academy is a full-service provider of ITSM education. We've trained tens of thousands of students on-site across the Americas and in our public training centers in Fort Lauderdale, Dallas, Minneapolis, Phoenix, Preston, Salt Lake City, and Tampa, as well as in our virtual classroom. Now let's introduce today's speaker, Jayne Groll. Jayne is ITSM Academy's co-founder and president. She holds numerous certifications, including ITIL Expert and Service Manager, as well as ISO 20000 Foundation and Consultant certifications. She has a lot of familiarity with Agile principles and is a certified Scrum Master. Prior to co-founding ITSM Academy, Jayne worked for more than 20 years as an IT practitioner. Her experience spans a wide range of industries, including legal, telecommunications, retail, nonprofit, insurance, and hospitality. Jayne ensures that all ITSM Academy trainers bring similar practical experiences to each classroom and that all of our courseware incorporates that same depth of knowledge. Jayne recently helped co-found the Accredited Training Council Trade Association, known as the ATCTA, an industry group focused on uniting the ITSM training industry and promoting professional codes of conduct. Good morning, Jayne.
Good morning, Karen. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm particularly excited about today for two reasons. First, we're going to take a look at the basics. We're going to go back and look at what we've learned over the past several years, and we're also going to look at what we know now, so being able to kind of marry the theoretical to the practical and hopefully you'll come away with some good practical advice today. And as Karen said before, I'm particularly excited about the fact that we're going to be able to demonstrate our latest learning tool in the form of the game. So hopefully you've all had a chance to download the Ping virtual keypad. We'll give you another opportunity at the end if you haven't had a chance to do that or you joined us late to be able to do that. And that gives you a good opportunity to interact with the game and be able to test your own knowledge. So that should be kind of fun. So what we're going to do today is we're going to first start with a review of very basic problem management concepts. We're not going to get into a lot of detail, but we are going to need to level set that we're all coming from the same knowledge place. We're coming from the same learning place. So it's pretty much what we learned then. And then hopefully I'm going to be able to take you down some of the paths that we've had a chance to explore over the past 9 years and look at what's worked in reality. So some of the things based on the polling questions, looking at some of the techniques of problem management that have been successful for other organizations, and again, just some good grassroots advice for overcoming some of the most common challenges with this problem, with this process rather. One of the things that I've noticed over the past 9 years is many organizations started with incident management and then kind of grew problem management afterwards. And so it became a little bit of a challenge with some conflicting objectives or presumably conflicting objectives. At the end of the presentation, hopefully I'll be able to give you some guidance on some first or next steps based on the maturity of your process. And then we're going to play a game, Who Wants to Be a Problem Manager? So should be a fun time together, and again, I very much appreciate your joining us. As Karen said, if you have questions, we will allow time after the game for the Q&A. So please chat in those questions, and then Karen will be able to pose them to me at the end of the session. So let's start with what we learned then. And for some of you, then might have been yesterday. You might have come out of a foundation class or an operational support analysis class. Basics and understanding what the goal and objective of problem management is. So from ITIL, directly from ITIL, problem management manages the life cycle of all problems from first identification through further investigation, documentation, and here's the key, eventual removal. So the goal of this process is first to identify the underlying problem, to be able to investigate the root cause, diagnose the root cause, to document that root cause and hopefully be able to provide some type of a workaround. But the goal of the process, the output of the process, is the eventual removal of that problem. And that's somewhere where, again, as we go through this, we'll see that sometimes there's a little bit of disconnect about the eventual removal part. Again, going back directly from ITIL, the two definitions that are key to this process are problems and known errors. So ITIL defines a problem as the underlying cause of one or more incidents. So for every incident, there is an underlying cause. We'll take a look and see whether there's justification in investigating that problem. But for every incident, there actually is an underlying cause. And then a known error, which, you know, that term is used a little bit more casually. But in order for ITIL to define what we call a known error, it is a problem with a documented root cause and a workaround. So it's a problem that's been investigated. There is a root cause that's been identified, but there also must be an actionable workaround in order for that to be declared as a known error. Just knowing what the root cause is doesn't really give us any type of advantage. Being able to identify some type of a trusted workaround which allows incident management to restore service is much more important. Again, remember that because we're going to touch a little bit more on known errors as we go a little bit further. This process is preventive, and so its primary objective is to prevent problems and their resulting incidents. So if we remove the problem completely, we remove that error completely, then we won't have the same type of incidents going forward. It is also being used to minimize the impact of incidents through the use of the known error. Meaning if you have a sustainable workaround and eventual removal of that problem is not possible right now, then there is some way to restore service, perhaps in not a perfect way, but there is a way to restore service and retain productivity without necessarily being able to prevent future incidents. And again, we're going to touch on that as well. So again, the core of this process is investigation of the root cause, first, identify some type of a sustainable workaround second, but the process is not complete until the error is actually removed. Keep that in mind as we go forward, and that's what we learn, right? That's what we learn. So the scope really has two aspects. There's a reactive aspect to problem management where as a process, it's reacting to one or more incidents. So there's been some type of pattern of incidents that the service desk is detecting, or perhaps one of the technical folks has started to detect, and therefore there's justification to investigate the root cause. There's also an interesting aspect of problem management that's proactive, which means investigating the root cause before actually incidents have occurred. So it's the answer to the question why. Why is this happening? Or what risks do we have in this particular situation? Do we have a single point of failure? And can we correct that before there is a negative impact on the business? So proactive problem management is actually going to look for potential problems before there's a resulting incident. Reactive problem management is responding to incidents that have already occurred. And if you look at the red text on the bottom, really the difference between the two is how the process is triggered. One is hunting for potential. The other is reacting to reality. So the business value of this process, and again, remember this is what we've learned, is we reduce the time that's required to be able to resolve incidents and restore services, first by offering a workaround, but more importantly, I can't emphasize this enough, by ultimately removing that error and therefore preventing future incidents from occurring. That's the power of this process. However long it takes to remove that root cause, and in some cases it may be very easy to remove the root cause. In some cases you may not be able to remove it until you replace the product. But the ultimate eventual removal of that error is the power of this process. And there's a couple of interim milestones in between. When that occurs, service availability will be much higher because incidents will be prevented, or at least service will be able to be restored faster. The result of that is you'll have much more stable services, and the business and IT will be much more productive because there'll be less time spent restoring the same incidents over and over and over again. In the end, there is a reduction of cost, and there has to be a reduction of cost because every time we're ineffective in our attempt to apply a fix, or we have to apply a workaround, but the same incident appears very shortly thereafter, that's costing. Right? There's a cost that's associated with repeated incidents, and there's a cost associated with applying a fix that doesn't actually fix. So ultimately, this process and part of its power does reduce some good cost, and it absolutely improves the perception of IT from your customers. So, this can be used in a lot of ways. In fact, we did a webinar, I think, well, I live in a time warp, but I think it was about a year and a half ago, about using problem management to solve business problems, because it is a why process. It's why is this happening and what can we do to prevent this in the future. So organizations that have become very mature in problem management have developed some very good techniques, actually do use it to investigate business problems. Why is this particular business unit not producing on time or, in the way that they should. So just something to keep in mind in terms of justification for investing in this process. It can start off in IT and then eventually grow into being part of your corporate culture. So again, that's just a little bit of a visit back to the theoretical in terms of what problem management is designed to do, and all of the guidance, whether it's in IDLE or Microsoft Operations Framework, if it's an ISO 20000, all of the frameworks eventually address problem management as a very, very powerful process. But it's also important to know it's not the same as incident management. And looking at some of the polls, the integration between incident management and the service desk is very strongly there. So again, we're going to go now from the what we learned then to what we know now, and what sort of guidance, strategic approaches that I've seen and members of our staff have seen over the years as we work with different organizations. So essentially, let's go to what we know now. So some of the most common challenges that face organizations that are implementing problem management, and the number one is incidents and problems are confused. So we integrate, the processes do need to be integrated, there's no doubt about it, but they're treated as if they have the same goal and the same objectives and even the same process and procedures, same activities and procedures, and that's not true. They are not the same process with a different name. They really have different objectives, and I'll hopefully be able to demonstrate that to you very shortly. But looking at the incident process and the problem process as very strong interfaces between them, but not identical, I think is the first step to really being able to realize some of the power of problem management. Many organizations operate in a Band-Aid culture, which means we have a situation, we've seen multiple incidents, we apply a workaround or a Band-Aid to it, and we move on, and we never really take the time to investigate what the underlying cause is, and so therefore we really never address how to remove that error permanently and become a preventive environment instead of a Band-Aid culture. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. One of the, I think, the biggest challenges associated with problem management is the inability, that we don't necessarily have the skill for being able to understand what it will take to predict what kind of resources we need to investigate this problem, what's the effort or time that's going to be associated with it, and how do we prioritize this work against all the other work within IT. And then finally, how do we prioritize problems against each other? So that lack of analytical or business justification really deters this process from achieving its goal, because we don't know what it's going to take, so therefore we may choose to ignore the problem, or we may overkill it by applying too many resources to the wrong problems that don't necessarily address business impact. So being able to have that type of analytical skill is very important to this as well. The next bullet I think is particularly interesting based on the poll results, and it's lack of a structured approach. So most of us, when we're working on a problem, do resort to brainstorming, get a bunch of people together, either through email, physically in a room, virtually, to talk about what we think is at the root cause of this problem. So the investigation occurs either simultaneously in a group dynamic or individually, where we're brainstorming going, I wonder what's at the root cause here. One of the things that became pretty clear as organizations started to explore problem management is that structured approaches got them to the root cause faster, and the root cause was more likely to be the true root cause because of the use of some type of proven technique. So we're going to look at that as well. And then finally, it's just insufficient information. This process is a detective process. And so in order for it to do the correct level of detection, there have to be clues. And the clues are rooted in information. So it's making sure this process has access to multiple sources of information, accurate information, and the right information at the right time. So let's start with confusing incidents and problems. So for years, I had a mantra that said, incidents do not grow up to be problems. And too many times when working with clients, I see that that's the case. There's some perception that this incident is going to evolve into a problem, when in reality, the more incidents that occur around the same problem raise the possibility that the underlying problem should be investigated. So as I said before, there's always a root cause. My laptop, heaven forbid, could blue screen right now. And if that were to occur, that would be awful, considering you've all invested some time with me. I may or may not choose to investigate that root cause if I can reboot my laptop and it comes back perfectly and there's no further issues with it, right? Just some type of anomaly had happened and it's done. However, if it's blue screening, every 5 minutes or every day, then there's justification to investigate the root cause. In either event, my laptop's incident, the fact that this failure is occurring, is not the same as the underlying root cause. The symptom or the incident is that my laptop has a problem, and the restoral will be a reboot, but that's not going to fix the problem permanently. So the message here is they don't grow up to be problems. They provide clues to the root cause of the underlying problem. And so they're separate records, they should be treated separately, and you'll see the focus is really different. Incident management is very much a timed process, right? It's timed in terms of how long it takes us to restore service. Problem management is all about prevention. And so the goal is to ultimately remove the error whenever and however you can. So if you can remove it immediately, great. If you can't, identify the workaround, but don't necessarily close the problem record. Keep the problem record open until the ability for you to remove the error is available, even if someday in the future you have to actually upgrade the product or replace it. The reason this is so significant is if you have these two processes operating simultaneously, let's say in a major incident event. In a major incident event, you would want to be able to restore service to retain some level of productivity, but in the meantime, you'd also want a problem management team investigating the root cause. You would not want either process waiting for the other because the impact on your customers would be significant. So you would have your service desk or anyone else that the service desk escalated to working on this situation, trying to identify some way to keep service going. In the meantime, you'd have another team or another process focused on what's actually at the root cause and how do we stop this from happening again. So again, very, very powerful when they're executed simultaneously. They may share some resources. So the service desk could lie at the core of both processes, but they really should have different process managers. So having a combined role of incident and problem manager often creates some type of conflict because their focus is very different, and therefore they may need. IDLE used to address there was a myth, and I call it a myth because, who knows, but, in a situation where you had to reboot the server, the incident manager would want to reboot that server immediately in order to restore service. The problem manager would want to wait to capture the logs. So there would be conflict. What would be the ultimate solution is they'd figure out a way to copy the log somewhere else and then reboot the server so that both processes could operate well. But you don't want that decision being made by a single person. You want those different perspectives so that they can bounce off of each other and determine what is the best approach under the current circumstance. And again, think of a major incident when you're thinking about that. I think the most interesting part of this is when it comes to the service desk. I managed service desks for a long time, and again, the question always came, when can we close this incident? Because they're managed, they're measured on time, right? How quickly they're doing things, average time to restore service, average time to answer, first call resolution. I mean, there's a lot of metrics. The service desk that's measured around time. Well, in a situation where you have both processes, the incident record can close when the service is restored, even if you apply a workaround. But the problem record can stay open until the error is actually removed. It can be declared as a known error, but the record can stay open because it doesn't necessarily get managed or measured on time. So the next challenge is operating in a Band-Aid culture, and so a big part of this has to do with known errors. So one of the things that we've identified over time is that many organizations see known errors as the output of the problem management process. And as I've said several times already, this process really doesn't end until the error is removed. Are there situations where you can't remove the error, either because you don't have the control or because there's just no cost justification for investing that resource? Yes. So the known error becomes a milestone. It's not ultimately a resolution. If you make the business decision not to go further, that's fine, but you still didn't remove the error. And someday, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's a few years from now, you will be able to remove that error, either because you upgrade or replace the product where the error is rooted. So again, the error will always be removed. It's just a question of when. And perceiving known errors as resolutions is incorrect. Absolutely critical milestones, you may absolutely make the decision not to go further, but it's still not the end of the process because it hasn't prevented anything. And the goal of this process is to prevent future incidents. Is it a bad thing to do that? Absolutely not. But recognizing that you're still not at the end game is okay, right? It's okay. It changes the way you think. It moves you out of the Band-Aid culture because, as you can see from the third bullet, Band-Aids will eventually fall apart. There's only so far you can go by applying workaround, workaround, workaround before that starts to topple like a house of cards. Whether or not you move to the ultimate conclusion and how quickly you move there really has to be determined by business impact. So being able to look at the same formula of urgency and impact helps you justify whether you should take, once you've identified the known error, which again, let me remind you, root cause and workaround, whether you want to take it to the next level and how quickly you want to take it to the next level really has to be based on impact and urgency. But someday, somewhere, that error will be removed. It's just a question of when. And that's the last bullet. All problems can ultimately be resolved. Maybe not today, but they all can be resolved. Some may have to wait. If you look at software companies and how they manage, Microsoft only releases a service pack, what, once a year, maybe? So they've made a decision that, there are workarounds in their database, but any type of permanent solution has to fall into their release schedule. So the next piece of inability to be able to predict resources, effort, and priority is also important. It's not that we don't lack the skill, it's just that we've got so many different pieces that may be associated with being able to investigate and remove a problem. So very large IT organizations where you have outsourcers and suppliers that are involved in it, at that point, it's important to be able to coordinate all of that. So one of the things that ITIL suggests, and I think is pretty powerful, we've done a couple of webinars on these already, is to look at problem models. So a problem model is built based on your knowledge of repeat problems. So as problems occur, you can start to document what steps were taken, what was the sequence of those steps, who was responsible for performing them, when did they happen, if you needed to escalate, or if you would have been required to escalate, who would you have escalated it to, and what kind of steps do you need to preserve your evidence, or what type of documentation do you need. So you can start to build these models. So as the same or similar problems start to occur, you actually have a go-to place that predicts, okay, the last time we saw something like this, wouldn't be the same because hopefully you've removed the error, but the last time we saw something like this, here were the steps we took. Here was the priority that we predicted, right? Here were the constraints that we had. Here were the costs that were associated with it. And that will help not only move the problem through the process much more quickly, it would also help you determine whether it's justified to launch the investigation at all. So looking at problem models, ITIL's very strong on suggesting incident models, change models, and problem models as a good method for being able to predict the types of repeatable situations so that you're not reinventing the wheel every time the same type of situation presents itself. So as you start to build the models, you can replicate them in your tool. You can certainly identify what type of effort it's going to take. Now with an incident model, that's a little bit different because the goal there is to get to the restoration of service as fast as you can. So incident models are very, very powerful in the sense that they kind of make the workflow much more quickly. Problem model really helps you first justify the investigation, second of all determine whether you want to continue with the investigation after the known error is declared, and then finally being able to identify who needs to be involved in certain situations, what are the costs, what are the constraints. Very, very powerful concept. Now, as I said before, many of you are using brainstorming as an approach, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some very, very proven techniques for getting to the true root cause. And ITIL documents some of these. It's easy to get information about a lot of these. Some of these you may have already been using like fishbones. But a structured approach doesn't add a level of bureaucracy. What it does is it keeps the team focused. It gives them a formula for being able to identify root cause, because one of the tricky parts when you're starting to investigate root cause is staying away from blame. So, as we start to do a root cause investigation, there is a little bit of the culture of follow the pointing finger, right? Where is that finger going to point to? And is it going to point to me? I'm going to try to deflect it somewhere else. So, first of all, and you'll see in the next steps, we can't do this as a blame culture. You've got to make a commitment that problem management exists in a no-blame culture. If there's a human resource issue, that there are repeat problems based on a particular individual or line of business, that's a human resource issue. But as far as being able to identify the underlying root cause, be able to identify a trusted workaround, and ultimately to remove that error, does require some type of group focus so that everyone's looking in the same direction, there's a lack of fear, and the ability to get to the root cause much more quickly. Unfortunately, it's not an exact science. Right? It's like medicine. I come in with a bunch of symptoms. The doctor has to take a best guess at what's at the root cause. Well, same thing here. It is a health check of sorts, and being able to use the structured formula really will help you through that. So you can see on the screen there are some proven. Kepner-Trago's been around a long time. It really helps to kind of make a list of the possible suspects and then methodically go through that list to be able to identify and test which is the true root cause. Ishikawa diagrams, fishbone diagrams help you really work your way through the thought process. A lot of brainstorming sessions will use the fishbone. Just again, give everybody kind of boundaries around which to work. Chronological analysis is really time-based, so looking at the times and the triggers that occurred within that timeline, trying to figure out at what point did this problem actually occur. A pain value analysis, really being able to assess the pain of a particular problem and then being able to work your way from there. Some of you may be familiar with Pareto, that's the 80-20, right, where 80% of your problems will be caused by 20% of your infrastructure or services. And then I think most of you are pretty familiar with brainstorming. Now, if you look at the red question underneath, as Karen said in my introduction, I am a certified Scrum Master. And one of the things I've been looking at lately, if you're using Agile or Scrum techniques in your organization, is could you apply some of that to problem solving? And I'm not going to answer that for you today, but it's a good question, right? So, look around your organization if you are invested in Agile or Scrum to be able to say, hey, some of those things that we're doing, something that can be applied to our problem solving. And someday in the future, hopefully not too far in the future, I'll do a subsequent webinar on this and we'll be able to answer that question. But interesting one to pose. And then, as I said in the beginning, problem management is a detective process. Really got to take out your magnifying glass and look at all the clues. And because it's not an exact science, it's really listening to, what happened before, what happened during, what are the patterns that are associated with this kind of problem, what sort of incidents have shown up, and what are the symptoms. Proactively, how do we identify risk that an incident will occur before it actually does occur. So there's a lot of information that can provide great resources to a problem team. And the more access they have to accurate information, the more quickly they can identify the true root cause. So looking at incident records, one of the flaws that we've seen in reality is organizations don't record all of their incidents. ISO 20000 says, right, but they don't record all of their incidents. They selectively choose which incidents to record. The guy walking down the hall that gets kidnapped by some user doesn't capture that incident, or something that comes into an operational team late at night may not be captured that incident, but they're all clues. And so the first commitment has to be to record all incidents. You can build templates to be able to get through those records very quickly so that there's a model associated with it, the record is open, it's auto-populated, and it's closed. But at least you have a timestamp and at least you have a history that it has occurred. And the problem team will welcome that because they can start to look at patterns of time and date and day of week and line of business or individual user. There's so much information that's included in that small little auto-populated record. So that has to be the first commitment. You also want to build your incident and problem database in a joined situation, right? You want to do it as a one-to-many. So one problem record is open. Remember, it's not the same as the incident record, so you don't convert it. You open a problem record, and then you join it within your tool to all of the associated incidents and ultimately all the associated changes so that you could look at this problem and be able to drill down into the symptoms or possible suspects as you're working through your investigation. One of the challenges I know I faced when I was an IT director was getting people to put in, much more complete information about what they had done to resolve a problem or to restore service. And so while you don't need, a 5-page essay, you do need more than the words done. Done, completed, fixed, over. So finding that balance within your own teams in terms of what is meaningful information to be captured in the record is something that has to be explored because these records ultimately turn out to be historical. And when we're investigating other incidents or other problems, we're going to need to go back to those records and review what was done before. It's also critical for your problem models. Want to make sure that all of the records are properly categorized. I know in the service desk, we often get the incident, we apply a category to it. Part of your closing procedures, though, with incidents and problems should be to recategorize, to make sure that what the symptoms were at the beginning and what the actual root cause were at the end match up, so that when we go back in time and look at these past records, we can query it based on the right category. So it's do it at the beginning, do it at the end, and then make sure that at the end you capture the correct root cause in your category. And then lots of other information. You may have operational logs in your data center. You may have network maps. There's lots of monitoring data that's collected, and that all has to be accessible to the problem team so that they could put the pieces together and ultimately be able to perform a good investigation. So, I mean, just in conclusion, there's a lot of things that problem management can provide to IT and to the business. To IT, certainly facilitates the ability to avoid some unplanned work, to be able to avoid interruption and to get it right the first time, and then also to prevent that cycle of incidents that, you know, some of us live with because we live in a Band-Aid culture. So successful problem management really does rely on the fact that IT and the business do have to recognize its benefits, and it has to be distinguished from incident management. So again, the service desk will play a very, very important role here, but I absolutely encourage you to have separate incident managers and problem managers, two different people serving those roles. You need to make sure you've got the right resources. You need to make sure you've got enough time to be able to work on the critical problems, and then, as I just said, access to information. The next bullet is absolutely critical to success, and there has to be an absence of blame. You can't do this in a blame culture. There has to be some type of amnesty, because the goal here is continual improvement in learning. And you can't improve if you're hiding, right? If you're so afraid of being blamed that you're actually hiding information or preventing the process from moving forward, then it's serving as some type of a bottleneck or handout. There has to be some type of knowledge of proven methods and techniques. A lot of information on the internet. Certainly there's educational opportunities in the form of the OSA class. Dives a little bit deeper into some of the techniques. There's webinars about it. I mean, there's just a lot of good information about root cause analysis techniques. There's even some tools. I haven't played with any of the tools, so I can't talk to them. I can't, I don't know them by name, but I do know that there's some what they call RCA tools. And then it just has to be relentless. There has to be a commitment, like a cold case detective, that even those that have good workarounds, good known errors, will ultimately be researched till the end so that the error ultimately can be removed. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Karen, and Karen's going to help us get set up for the game, Who Wants to Be a Problem Manager?
Thank you, Jane. And, just a couple of comments as we move forward. Tony said that the phrase that he likes to use effectively is fix the issue, not the blame. Don't fix blame.
It's a good one. Love it.
Yes, yes. Okay, so for those of you who are a little bit late to logging in, we are very excited to be able to, in 2013, roll out games as a learning tool in the classroom. And we've created a game to play with you today. So if you have a smartphone or if you want to use your PC, however you want to do that, we'd like you to download your virtual keypad. So if it's mobile, you can see on the screen it's www.c3ping.com/mobile. And here's the link if it's Windows, www.c3ping.com. And the ping ID for this game that we're going to play this morning is 5381. So you'll need that number. This information is also in your chat window. So if you have any questions while you're logging in to set up your virtual keypad, just chat us and we will help you with that. And while we are grouping the Q&A in the background, and while you're getting ready with your virtual keypads, Leslie Kaposius, who's our Senior Practice Manager here at ITSM Academy, she's here with us today to talk about problem management education. Good morning, Leslie.
Hi, Karen. And thanks, everyone. It looks like based on the questions we're seeing come through that many of you are ready for a deeper dive into problem management education and are seeking some guidance. So I just wanted to provide that real quickly before our true Q&A. If you are already ITIL Foundation certified, there are 2 advanced certification class options we recommend for problem management. In the life cycle track, we recommend service operation, which we are offering virtually April 15th. Or in the capability track, we have operational support and analysis, which is running March 11th in Dallas or April 29th in Fort Lauderdale. And all of this information I'm giving you can be found on our website, ITSMacademy.com. And should you not know what class is best for you, which is a question we get all the time, and it's a very natural one, we do have a white paper on the ITIL qualification scheme on our website that does address role-based training, and I think we can put that up on our chat feature too. Or you can email info@itsmacademy.com or simply ask your practice manager, because that's what we're here for. So I'm sure this did not solve all your problems, but I hope it answered some of the questions that we're seeing. And with that, Karen, are we ready to play the game?
I'm not sure. I'm just checking that now. Let's see. Jane?
I think this is Donna.
Okay, well, I'm going to pass it over to Donna. Yes, she is.
Hi, Donna.
Hello, everybody.
We are ready to play the game this morning, Donna. We're very excited.
All right. Have I been made an organizer? So that our attendees will be able to see me?
Yes, ma'am, you have.
All right, I think you're coming over to me now. Excellent. So you should be sitting in a screen. If you've logged into your virtual keypad, you should be seeing a screen right now that says waiting for your quiz to begin. As soon as I begin the game, you're actually going to be asked to key in your name. And so go ahead and key in your name when you're prompted to do that, and then we will go ahead and start the game. All right, so you should now be being prompted for your name. I'll give it a moment for folks to log in. Look at all those sign-ins. Lots of folks interested in playing today. Excellent. All right, it looks like we've had a pause, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the one thing I want to remind you is look at your pad. Look at the screen for the question, and then look at your pad for the answer options. All right, here we go. And here's our first question. And now I'll reveal the answer options. That was freakishly fast. We've got a few more folks thinking about it. I'm going to give you one more second. Last couple of stragglers, and the correct answer, hopefully you all learned from Jane, is to investigate the recall. So well done to those of you who scored correctly.
Donna, I'm sorry, can you turn the volume down on the music at all? We've had a couple of people ask. And then for those of you who are still trying to get in, once the game has been launched, you can't come in. So the 5381 isn't going to work for you now, but you can watch the others play. Thank you, Donna. Sorry.
All righty. So who maintains information about workarounds? I'll give it one more second. Very decisive on that one. Everyone hopefully successfully selected B. And the problem. Well done. Question number 3. So lots of green check marks there. And here are your answer options. I think Jane made that one easy for you. Her screens showed them both together at the same time. One more moment. We've got a couple of folks still playing. And the correct answer is C, your Ishikawa diagrams. So well done. Excellent. So Marie, you are the winner by a second ahead of Kate. So well done. And I'll turn it back to Karen for Q&A. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for playing.
And Marie, if you want to shoot an email to info@itsmacademy.com, just let us know that you're the winner, and we're going to send you out a little something special. Thanks, everyone, for playing. And sorry it was loud.
Well, thank you, Donna. That's a great demonstration of how effective these games are going to be in the classroom as a learning tool, so we really appreciate that. And before we get to the Q&A, which is just going to be in about 30 seconds, just a couple of things, just so we don't interrupt ourselves, because I know some of you have to jump off at noon. So our next